Hey, it's From the West Barn with Joe West and
Mike Shimshack.
We're here today with the great Jerry Goldenson, a dear friend, a mentor to me, an inspiration, and also the president and CEO of KHS America. He also sits on the global board for KHS America. Before that, he was at another music retailer and has spent a lifetime sort of in that world. Also a great drummer. And he's been a great friend. He's part of the crew of folks that end up on porches late at night with lots of tobacco being incinerated and whiskey being drank. But if I have a question or need something to bounce somebody off of, he's usually on the very short list to do that. So thank you for coming on, buddy. We appreciate you. Welcome.
Oh, I appreciate being here. I love the show. Podcast's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So KHS is... People may not know it, but they do know it. It's kind of like that commercial. Right. Remember, we don't make the bumper. We make the bumper, the thing that makes the bumper, right? So KHS America is a music retailer or music merchant that has 21 brands of instruments under it, if I'm correct. Some of those brands that you might recognize are Sonor, Mapex, Hohner harmonicas, Hercules stands, Jupiter and EXO instruments, a lot of those in the educational world. Infused, it goes on and on and on. So tons of brands that you know, which is part of what I want to talk to you about today, which is like, how do you manage, the scope and mission statement? I know you have a global mission statement for what y'all are doing, but I just can't imagine. Like I said, okay, let's make a drum company and let's just focus on drums. If you look at DW or Pearl, they've got a whole building filled with people doing that. And you all have a building filled with people, but they're managing 21 brands. And I got to ask, Alec, how's that possible?
Well, yes, we are a global company. I represent KHS America, which is, of course, the American operations for a global company. And we are a family of 20 plus brands, and it is difficult, but each brand has its own identity and so forth. And we have this unbelievable team of people that seemingly are able to juggle it, as we move forward. As a company, and you kind of mentioned it, we do have a vision statement, a mission, a set of core values that kind of guides us through that whole process. And at the heart of it, we have some tremendous brands, but honestly, they're all driven by the same vision and they're all driven by the same kind of mission and our core values. So for us, as long as we stay focused on that and what our purpose is, that's what allows us to be able to do it. We believe music is really an essential part of every life, and we state that in our core values, right? So, as long as you can keep to that, and realize you're not just shipping brown boxes out of a warehouse, and treat one with the intensity and integrity that they each deserve. It's daunting, but not impossible.
Right. And it's cool because you came up as a drummer, so you really are one of us, right? So you still you're the same thing wrapped in different, skin. I'd say a lot of industry positions seem to be the same heart of the person, and then every tech at a studio is the same. Every A&R person, every song plugger, every songwriter sort of got a lot of the same. Oh, that's that person. So you are definitely one of us, and it's what drew me to you as well. You grew up in Pittsburgh. I grew up in Pittsburgh, although we didn't know each other in Pittsburgh. I had heard of you.
Still trying to figure out how that didn't happen.
Yeah, in a city like that of that size, I can't believe it didn't happen. But I've always loved that about what you all do over there. It's why, I bought into KHS because I bought into you, right? I knew those brands, and I actually had I had a lot of those brands and used a lot of things, especially Hercules stuff. But when you went over there, for me, it was like, okay, I want to be a part of whatever it is they're doing. It's like my buddy's over there. I believe in what my buddy, like his mission statement as a human being, it's like I had bought into you already. So whenever you moved over to KHS, it was kind of like, yeah, there's a lot of great things over there. But really what I gave a damn about was you. And I knew that you were going to do something spectacular over there. You know, it's kind of like we look at the correlations between, on this podcast, we try to find the correlations between what people are doing as creators, right? And we just talked to Andre Cassetta at G7 the other day, and
great guy.
And we were saying he really feels like he's telling a story. He feels like he is, even though we would say he's on the business side of things, it feels very much like what we do. And I find that whenever I hang out with my buddies like you, who spend most of your time in what would be considered the corporate world, even though it's a music brand, it still feels remarkably similar to us as musicians, especially musical entrepreneurs, people trying to make a career. I see a lot of the same things. It's unbelievable how similar someone who you would say, oh, I could never do a corporate job, and then you go hang out or do a workshop with a group at KHS, and you're like, oh, this is exactly what I do all the time. There is no difference.
Yeah. So, how many people at your office are musicians?
Well over half of the people here are musicians.
That has to affect the culture. It has to.
Absolutely. You know, if you would have told me I'd be in this position years ago, I would have never thought that. But this really became my purpose, right? I was not, you know, I appreciate Joe's sentiment. I was never a great drummer, you know, but I love music. And this really allows me to be part of something certainly much bigger than myself. You know, talking about, you know, a corporate America, you know, we never think of us as a corporate entity. What we think about us is that we are inspiring people to play music, you know, something that's, you know, you can't go a day without. I mean, it's just virtually impossible. You cannot do it. And if you did, the world would be certainly a much worse place.
Mm.
You know, I take great inspiration. You know, you talk about being part of this crew. You know, I look at various people and am able to take inspiration away. And what you guys do, you know, Mike, Joe, you inspire me. And I look at what you do and think, okay, that is kind of proof as to why we do what we do. You know, it's it just is proof to the purpose, and I continue to look for that kind of inspiration, whether it be from an Ed Jones, you know, who's in a completely different world, but his passion and inspiration for all things music, you know, makes me realize that what I do can inspire him to do what he does. And he has this huge global, you know, medical supply company and health trust that you can find those ties and you can find those inspiration. And that's, for me, what life is kind of about, right? Where am I going to draw from to be able to help execute the things we need to do to fulfill our purpose?
I think that if you look at a company and their mission statement is that first of all, they say music is essential, right? And so you guys have to push boxes out the door. That's part of what it is that you do, right? But the why of why you do that is it's the reason I would choose someone over another person. So if you have two people at a flea market selling the same item, but you have a different why and why they're selling it, you have to choose who you connect yourself with. And that goes back to what I said about you. It's like, I think KHS has been a brand that I have known of peripherally. I became intimately invested in it when my buddies started to work there. So it's like, I think as a brand, people buy into Apple. People believe that when they buy an Apple product, it's because, well, that's what I believe. You know, it's part of who I am, right? And when you went to work at KHS, I said, well, if he's working there, you know, I believe so strongly and support him so strongly, I'm gonna take on that feeling for the company. So, you know, it's just one person, me. But all your employees, if they go by that mission statement and by those visions that you have, it's hard not to buy and want to stand up for a company that has that as the reason why they do it. You know, it's not just a conglomerate pushing plastic and metal at you. So I think that's an honorable thing we should all strive towards. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you hit it right on the head. Is right. You have to come up with, as Simon Sinek would say, is the why, right? Why are we doing it? I think the great thing about the people here and the reason we've had such tremendous success is because we've all been able to identify with the why and what our purpose is, and even in the most difficult times like we're in now, we've been able to maintain that focus and not lose sight and be distracted by all the things that are kind of pulling against us. There's, a friend of mine wrote a book many years ago, and unfortunately he's not with us anymore, but he used to say that, walls are, put up, but not to keep you out. It's really to keep those who don't want it bad enough away. And it's our purpose and our means to try to figure out how do we go around it, over it, under it, through it, whatever it may be. We do whatever it takes. And you can only do that if you really are serving a greater purpose and understand why we're doing things. And that's what makes companies like a health trust or an Apple or some of these big companies. It's what makes you guys successful. When I get a chance to speak with either one of you, the passion and the reasons you do things is because you understand why you're doing it, right? You guys have a purpose. Joe, I've heard you say it many times, is that, this is just what you were meant to do. I'm not sure this is necessarily what I was meant to do, but while I'm doing it, I'm going to do it as best I can and serve those that work with.
It's a byproduct of sort of who you are, so right. I think that's the beauty of, there's a lot of similarities in what we keep finding after talking to people all throughout, from session musicians to songwriters to publisher to CEO and executive, is that there's a lot of similarities in why people do what they do and the passion behind what they do. And those people all seem to sort of see themselves in each other, whereas coming up as a kid, I never thought I'd never had a day job or a corporate job. So I never imagined that I could even cope in that world. But then whenever I came into that world through doing some corporate events and some workshops where I'd go into a corporation and work with them for a day or so, I came to find that they were exactly like me, that it wasn't so separate, and I think that if we find the commonalities, if I'm a drummer, session drummer, or if I'm a record producer, or if I'm a songwriter, or if I'm a publisher, when you find the commonalities of what other successful people that are, and by success, I mean people that are able to do it for a living. They may not be millionaires, but they're able to perpetuate and earn money as a living. If you find the commonalities between separate people, for me, it ties it together. And it's it gives me a greater view at the web, the actual Charlotte's Web of how you succeed, why people succeed. It's, of course, they all have a lot of similarities. And if you could say, okay, I need to bring up my game in this department, I need to scale up this. Those are all invaluable things once you realize we're all doing something creative. That's why this isn't a podcast about songwriting or making records. It's a podcast about creating, because once you recognize that, it's oh, this is solvable in some form. If you have enough, walls that you're willing to climb over, it is a solvable thing. And that's why I love having such a wide scope of people that have some connection to overcoming.
I do believe, I'm with you, Joe. I think that, there are some common traits that make people and situations successful. And the great thing, you've come in and done some things for us, and it's always being able to leverage other people's perspective, right? People with common values and insights, but yet they bring something that's different. So whether it's you going into a corporate world, it isn't that much different, but you're able to look at it through a different lens, right? And that's huge value to those that can appreciate that, Mm-hmm. When I look at all the things Mike has been doing and throughout his career, and I'm inspired by the fact that he's always not necessarily reinventing himself, but evolving into all these different projects, because he takes inspiration from various things. And, and I try to share that information and that kind of passion and instill that in all the people that work with us, whether it's here in the U.S. or in Taiwan or China, Japan, it doesn't make a difference. It's the same mentality. find your inspiration to help elevate your purpose.
Right. And half of it is realizing, hey, if that guy made it over the wall, I can make it over the wall.
Well, I'm sure people look at me and figure, well, if he can do it, it can't be that hard.
Hey, all right. So this brings up my next topic. You used to weigh 400 pounds.
I did used to weigh 428 pounds.
428 pounds. And I got to tell you, you wore it well. You didn't, I mean, yes, you were definitely big, but it worked for you, but you lost over half of your weight, right?
Yes.
You got down to what was the lowest you got to?
223.
223. And you did that in less than a year without lap band surgery, without any kind of crazy diet pill, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So what did you do for people listening?
It all started. I should start where it started. A couple years ago, I had one of my very best friends diagnosed with cancer, and just like either one of you, he was one of us. He's he was always there for me. Just one of those very special people. And at the same time, my father, who was in his 90s, was diagnosed with cancer as well. And it was a really kind of difficult time. And I had the opportunity, fortunately, even with my travel schedule, to be able to see them both, closer towards the end of their lives. And they both kind of looked at me and, said the same thing. It was basically like, listen, it's really kind of too late for us and we're okay with it, but you have too many people that rely on you. You have family and friends and a business to run. Get your shit together. And it really, it takes sometimes those moments. You get so caught up in your everyday that, you don't realize you're not taking care of yourself. And by not doing that, then you're not the best person you can be. So I'm not one of these that stand on a soapbox and say, you have to do this or that. So I just decided at the time, I found a doctor, worked with him, went through all the tests and just to figure what was my starting point. And, I go back in to see him and he rolls out what seemingly was like a 300-page document and said, well, here you go. Here's all the issues. Where do you want to start? And the very first thing he told me was, he says, well, let's just, get you moving. He says, he asked, do you have stress? I said, well, yeah, sure. Who doesn't? Do you sit a lot? Yeah. Are you on a plane a lot? Do you travel? Yes, yes, yes. So all these things. And he just said to me, he says, well, just get up and start moving. So I did that. I committed to myself. And I didn't really tell anybody I was doing it. I just committed to myself that I was going to get up and just start moving. I started walking. And I would walk in the afternoons, a few times around our building instead of taking a lunch. And then I started coming in very early in the morning to be on phone calls with Taiwan or Germany or China. And so I'd walk in the morning and I started walking in the afternoon, and it just kind of progressed. And then I started eating better and went on kind of a keto-based diet. And then I also started adding in, different elements where I started with an intermittent fasting program where I would eat just once a day. So it was just, it kind of just scaled itself up. And as I started feeling better, it kind of, it's kind of like a flywheel, right? You kind of have to push on it a little bit. And as you get it moving, that momentum kind of carries you forward. So no question, I feel better. But besides the physical, response that I was able to achieve, it was really, for me, the best part of it was my mental acuity. You didn't realize you were in such a fog, all the time. I didn't sleep. I didn't, if I got 2 hours of sleep a night, it was a huge victory. Wow. So once I was able to start bringing these things more in alignment, it just made the results kind of speak for themselves. And
So what's
I've gained some of that weight back, but it's not been that drastic. I now know mentally where I have to be, put myself in that position.
So when you're walking, what's the most miles you've walked in a day?
Most miles in a day? Well, at one time or collectively? Because
Collectively over the day.
And walk approximately 6 to 9 miles in the morning. And I start around 5 a.m. And then at lunch, so it's about an hour, maybe another 5 miles. And on weekends, could be anywhere from 12 to 15 miles
a day
at a single time.
Wow.
It's very interesting. As I was walking and I was looking for things to listen to, and of course, music was an essential part of that. But I started looking for different things to kind of listen to and learn from. And one of the ones was the book was Walk to Beautiful?
Jimmy Wayne, yeah.
With the Jimmy Wayne book and listening to his story and how that inspired me. And I've had a chance to meet Jimmy, an incredible story, incredible person. I thought he did a great job on the podcast I heard you guys did with him. But listening to him about walking across America, and it kind of inspired me to kind of do that. And I think I guess in the 1 year, I was probably a little over 4,300 miles in 2019.
Oh, that's incredible.
So I would track it, and then I'd keep a log just to see the progress. And
all right, so why don't you tell us what it looks like as a president and CEO of a company? I know not everybody does this, and everybody talks about like Jocko getting up at, he'll show his watch on Instagram every day, and it's like he's working out at like 4:45 in the morning, which is incredible. Why don't you tell us, what time do you get up in the morning?
I typically get up around 4.
4 in the morning.
Yeah.
And then walk us through a normal day that it takes to get your job done. Because for me, it's like I call you, you're still at work at 6 and 7 at night.
Yeah. Well, I live in Brentwood. Our offices are out in Mount Juliet. It takes me a minute to get out here. I like to get in early. One, of course, I get a lot done. But when I started the walking routine in the morning, it also allowed me to be able to take phone calls from overseas with our parent corporation and so forth. So, our 5 o'clock is the end of their day. It's 6 o'clock over there. So it gives us an opportunity to be able to
our 5 a.m.
What's that?
Our 5 a.m. is the end of their day.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're about, depending on daylight savings time or whatever, 13 to 14 hours ahead of us. And then it's not as drastic with Germany, but similar in nature, of course. Yeah. There's a time difference. So it allows me to be able to communicate and
how is that to do? Like, are you breathing heavy on these calls? I mean, is that odd? Do they know that, hey guys, I'm not honest, I'm actually walking
10 miles.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine.
It became known, right? So it became known that, when you start, it's dark out and then lights coming up and they can start hearing birds. They assume something was going on.
Just like what I picture is you, second quarter. It's like, Jerry, what are you doing over there? I hope you're on a treadmill.
No, that's just how passionate I am about music. I get so excited.
So what? Okay, so you get up at 4 a.m. You're at the office by what time?
Well, I try to get between 5:30. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's later. It's not so restrictive. It depends on what I have going on. What time did I get home the night before? Mm-hmm. Because besides also being on calls in the morning, sometimes we have to take calls late at night, which would be their morning, the following morning. So we might be on a call 8, 9, 10 at night. And, so it all kind of depends. So once I get done, I'm either on a call. So I don't have a call every day, but I'll come into the office, just kind of scan through emails. I'm a big believer in making sure that I reply to everything possible. Even if I don't have an answer, let them know that I'll get back with you. So whether it's a consumer, a dealer, one of our other partners, and that way I can start the day, fresh. Every Monday morning at 9, we have a, executive meeting with our team, and we kind of just talk about the week previous. What do we have going on this week? Where are we going? What do we need to accomplish?
Yeah.
And then it's just throughout the day, it's kind of a steady stream. We have an open door policy here. So if you need me, come find me. And
I love that story. You said that. So when you walk around the building, you said, hey, anybody can walk with me and talk with me. So like if you just got hired in the warehouse, you can go walk with the president and CEO of the company, and you could talk about whatever you want to talk about. I mean, that was unheard of when I was, coming up and trying to talk to a boss.
The walking thing took on a life of its own. So to the point where we started having walking challenge. Last year, we had a target of doing so many laps around the building. And so people would, come out and log their own laps around the building. And I donated $1 for every lap had we made our goal to a charity. So I did that out of, my own personal money because, I was kind of inspired by the fact that they were inspired to get out and kind of walk. So we started doing that as a company, and then people would come just join me during the afternoon or just start talking. And then this will sound bad. I don't mean it to sound bad, but of course, I really looked forward to that personal time to kind of think about what I had going on in life and so forth. And then, I welcomed people to come walk, but
I know where this has to be going. Like somebody complaining about the hand soap dispenser in the bathroom on the 3rd floor, right?
So, they don't like the scent. I understand.
It's lavender. I mean, how do you know that I don't like cherry? It's lavender. Like, why would they put lavender in it?
It's soothing.
Yeah.
So we started a thing, and people could sign up, and we had what we called Walk and Talk Wednesdays. So we tried to confine it to a Wednesday, and that worked for a short time. But then, I missed walking with people. So every once in a while, people still come, and they'll walk around, and it doesn't matter. Anybody within the company. We can talk about
that's a great
work. We can talk about personal lives. You'd be amazed at what people share with you when you're just out walking around and you don't have the walls of the office and titles involved. So,
yeah, I don't even know if I should say this. I guess I should. It's public. I don't even know this person, but somebody's on my Facebook feed that keeps talking about a prolapsed anus. Some girl is living her story about her prolapsed anus on Facebook. And it's just like, it's like a car wreck. I can't not read it. I search for it now on the little top scrolling. But it's just like, how on earth does a girl in her 20s, she's a pretty girl, she's a musician and an artist, what are people thinking? It's like, how does this get out of your head onto Facebook? But people never blow up.
Yeah, people just feel like they need to share, and that's the platform they share. Maybe they feel more comfortable rather than face-to-face.
Totally rational. It's the last thing. I'm a 50-year-old dude, and I wouldn't put that on Facebook. But 23-year-old girl, okay. All right, so as if the tariffs, I remember talking to you about tariffs about a year ago.
Yeah.
And, it's like, oh, this is challenging. This is the big challenge that KHS is going to face, bringing product that's made abroad into the United States. And let's keep in mind, folks, that all of the world of KHS, it's a global company. The U.S. market is bigger than the sales from all the rest of the world. It's the largest market share of what they're doing.
Where's KHS based?
KHS, the global headquarters is in Taipei, New Taipei City, Taiwan.
Gotcha.
Okay. So we were talking and smoking a cigar, and we're talking about these tariffs, and it's like, oh, what are we going to do? Little did we know that you were going to get mowed down by a tornado and then have COVID-19. So the tariffs are like,
on the list.
ain't got time for tariffs. It's like, this triage this. So
Right.
you, with the Nashville tornadoes that happened in May, that have now been, diminished quite a bit because of the COVID conversation, it went right down your street, smashed all the buildings all around you. All the power lines were down. You had to go in and literally go under giant, like those big power lines that you see going across the countryside. He was crawling under them to get to where he was to see if his building was still there. Your building was mostly untouched, but it didn't have service. So your logistical, all your servers and all your manpower was, it was difficult to operate your business. So went right from that into COVID-19. So tell me, like, how does that work? Like, how do you sleep at night? How are you able to deal and cope? Because stress it's a dynamic thing. Every human being only has the capacity for so much stress, and human beings, someone may be able to handle more or less, but we're talking, fractional. Your stress with that life, it's like, I wouldn't even be able to go to bed at night. Like, how do you cope with that? Like,
Well,
tell me about what it looks like now currently and what it is that some of the challenges, and just talk a little bit on.
Well, before it all started, I had all my hair. So, there's always going to be a challenge in life. That's the one thing we know, right? Change is evident no matter what. And yes, the past couple of years have been probably a little more than you would expect. And yes, it's stressful. And no, I don't really sleep. But maybe not for the reasons. My stress comes from trying to find answers and try to figure out how do we progress past these things, because I have other people's lives that I feel, committed to. So whether the people that work for us or our educators or our dealers, our manufacturing partners and so forth. So we are a huge portion of the global sales. And I'm always trying to figure out, what I do, how does it affect those others, and how can I figure out to get past whatever that may be. And lately, yes, it's been a struggle. When we first started dealing with the tariff issue, I kind of was able to identify that early on before people started talking about it. And, we kind of in our heads were planning for that. So we put a plan in place. We started ordering an abundance of inventory pre-tariff so that we could try to absorb pricing for our dealers and consumers. And that was able to carry us through the end of last year without substantial impact to pricing. We didn't raise prices, to those because we knew it was going to be a difficult time for many. And then, of course, we started hearing about the COVID situation. I remember first hearing about it when we were at the Winter NAMM show in California. And now you can imagine that's our largest trade show. And you're surrounded from people from all over the world, including Wuhan, right? So Wuhan is famous for their cymbal manufacturing and percussion products. And so I could tell you that I had meetings with those people, many of them, I don't know if they had it or not. So we started hearing about that. But then, of course, the beginning of March hit, and we have this tornado that comes across. And it was incredibly scary. We weren't really sure, as you know, it happened in the early morning hours. And I had no idea, what the state of our building was. I was incredibly fearful. I ended up driving out to the offices only to not be able to get to them because the path the tornado took literally came straight down Interstate 40 and right, our building was right in the path. And so I didn't know what to do. I ended up pulling the car over because I couldn't get past. The police wouldn't let anybody pass. Roads were blocked. And just kind of hiked through the woods because I wanted to know if our facility was okay. Were we going to have a business to go back to? End up crawling through the woods. Power lines were down, and not the safest move, but kind of climbed underneath the power lines that were laying on the road and through a ditch.
Sounds safe.
Safety first. But it was my stomach really fell because we have several distribution buildings. A company called Siva, they do distribution for Dell computers. Those buildings were gone, and those were the first buildings I saw. These are large, 250,000 square foot facilities, just devastated. And I couldn't see our building, so I trekked down the road. Certainly got my walk in that morning, and came upon our building, and it was relatively unscathed. And incredibly grateful for the fact that, for whatever reason, amongst all the devastation, that we were okay, as physically okay from a building standpoint. Of course, we had no power, and we had no, we had no systems, no internet, so forth and so on, and so we had, we were down for a couple weeks. We had everybody staying at home. Our IT guy, Jason Walters, just the dude is a magician. And he was able to get us up using hotspots and MiFi devices and so forth. And that's the kind of thing that, I've said many times, is that nothing brings people together kind of like a crisis. When you talk about being in alignment and understanding a purpose and a goal and your mission, sometimes it takes a crisis that pulls people together, but that's when you see the best come from people. And we certainly saw that during the tornado within the community. We had people working here that were all helping out within the community to try to get through the devastation, clean up, help people deal with the loss of life and property. And so, we get past it, right? We were, we ended up being okay, and somehow I think to myself that, maybe it is because music is essential, and we were just meant to be okay. And so we were, and then of course the, shelter in place orders, the stay at home orders, state by state, we watched it as everything started to shut down, and we were dealing with that. And, we took some aggressive actions as well, where we had to, we had everybody who could working from home. But, a testament to the will of our folks, our operations and warehouse people came in every day, regardless. And we make sure, of course, that they're safe and healthy. And but nobody blinked an eye, and everybody continued to do what we could to get products to those businesses that were still open. We found a way to facilitate orders for dealers direct to consumers. Drop shipping, whatever it was, we reached out to the music community and said, okay, how do we help? So, we were dealing with that. And then
I think that's interesting that another company who had a different motivation, a different why for what they do, would react totally different in that situation. It might not be financially as productive for you to scale to do some other solution, so you would just opt to not do anything. But if your why is what your why is, well, then you do it because music is essential.
Right.
I think that's an interesting point.
It's easy to fall into self-preservation mode, but I've always approached it by the fact that we have a responsibility to many other people other than just ourselves. And so we try, to do what we can. We don't do everything right, but we are going to try regardless.
I think it's interesting too. A crisis really brings out, it reveals maybe people's grit. It builds grit, right? People are stronger for living through the Great Depression and the World War II. And we've lost quite a bit of that. So this is a little workout for people. But watching people in crisis the cream will rise to the top.
It does, and it does inspire, and it pushes you to limits you might not have thought that you were able to do, and to find creative solutions and really test your resolve. But, you know, even before all these crises were happening, you know, we used to speak to this in large part when we've done various town hall meetings for our employees and so forth. And I would speak to the fact that, you know, there is nothing that pulls people together like a crisis, like we had the floods in 2010, or we had Katrina, you know, and see how people mobilized for that, or the devastation that happened in Texas, or whatever that may be. But what you take away from all of it is we know we can do these things. We have the ability, you know, to see them through. But we don't always have to wait for a crisis to do it.
Right.
Right? We can all be better at whatever we do. We can all be better people day in and day out.
Well, you know, the crisis is a sense of purpose. You know,
sure.
It really does. It shows you how important purpose is. And once the purpose goes away, well, then it's almost like postpartum. There's almost a depression, and there's a low. The roller coaster just took you down and now you're down in the doldrums, and it's almost like you want the crisis again to motivate you, to give you something to attack. You know, when we had to rebuild or clean out the World Trade Center, that happened in record time. When we built the Empire State Building, that happened in record time. The race to get to the moon, World War II, all these things that had purpose to them had a high designation of people having a laser focus. And I guess the question is, how do you be extraordinary in a time where purpose is not as evident? How do you keep people motivated to do something extraordinary?
Hey, it's not always easy, and not everybody will understand what that purpose is, but you have to be able to continually remind them, you know, and remind each other, remind yourself that, you know, about the successes and about the failures and the things like that. And it's a daily thing. It's, you know, there is that adrenaline that happens, you know, in crisis, and where everybody engages. And once it does go away, you kind of have a lull, right? And it's okay. You know, sometimes you just got to take a step back and take a breath, but then you have to remember what you were capable of in the darkest times. And hopefully that drives you to continue, you know? And so it could be, you know, where you have the crisis here and then you have the downward trend. But if you can refocus, and you can bring yourself up to here. Maybe you're not all the way up to here, but you're here. And then the next time you just keep building on that, and you learn from all of those things. And at least that's how I kind of look at it, you know.
I thought it was interesting that the Simon Sinek, you had mentioned him earlier. He, in one of his online videos, there is this graph where it shows purpose, like the company's founded for a reason and for purpose. And it's the growth of the company goes right along with purpose, right? And it gets bigger and more profitable. But then usually in every company, you get to a size and a scale, the purpose starts to do this, right? Let me get in the right angle of the camera. And money keeps going for a while, but eventually money will do this.
Right.
So it's crucial that there is purpose around what you're doing. It is why we do what we do. It's why people can be extraordinary. They can be extraordinarily lazy as well. So, you know, there's that in the Office Space where he's describing his days to the Bobs. You know, I don't know if you saw Office Space. He's like, you know, I usually come in about 15 minutes late and stare at my computer. And you know, and then I usually do that for about 20 minutes after lunch too. And in an actual day, I only get about 15 minutes of work actually done. You know, that's possible as well. People will work just as hard not to work. They'll be extraordinary at not working. You know, so it's interesting to find, like, oh man, how do we do this? I do it for myself because I'm independently employed. Me and Mike have to do it every day. Being an artist is really difficult to maintain that, especially if you've got the artist-centric brain. You know, you're not as capable. But there's got to be a way to find something, a reason why you should be in the room that day. And you have to sign off and commit to saying, I'm going to try to be extraordinary. I'm going to try to be it. every day. And if I'm not, I can fail, but I can't put too many failures in a row. I've got to figure out how to win this over the year. It's like, it's okay to go into neutral, but neutral is just the moment you shift into a new gear. So you're coming off the high of gear 1, you're revved up, you put it into neutral, you take a break, and then you've got to know that you've got gear 2 to go to and 3 and work your way through that. So it's just, that is the biggest creative conundrum that we have. How do we stay motivated? How do we find and keep purpose, something that's worthy? If we can harness that, you will be successful at running KHS or writing songs or producing records or mixing records or being a publisher or doing marketing. Whatever it is you lay your hand to do, you will be successful because people are extraordinary in their DNA. They do extraordinary things. They build pyramids, right?
Yep.
The biggest battle is finding and staying motivated. That's the true, that's how we are similar. Even though our days don't look the same, even though I asked you to call me at noon rather than the 4:45 when you get up, you know, I required Jerry to call me at 12 or 12:01.
12:01. Yes.
That's required. But the thing that we have in common that we are like, oh, this dude is like me, is the fact that we both are striving, not always succeeding, but striving to have purpose and find it.
Yeah, you have to have that. And you know, for us as a company and my own personal life, you know, you have to establish what your vision is, right? So your vision is a forward-thinking ideal, right? And then the mission, you know, you come up with your mission statement, and that's kind of the pathway to get you there. And figure out what's going to, you know, what is going to make up those things? What are your core values, right? And if all that's wrapped around what that purpose is, and then you try to find inspiration from wherever that may be, and you treat it as, like I treat KHS, not just America, but globally, as if it were my own company. You know, I want to do what I think is right for everyone, you know, and be able to sustain that. When I came to KHS, you talk about being able to, you know, how do you get to that next level, you know, because you have a growth curve and then it seemingly kind of plateaus, even though you may still have the same purpose. When I worked at my previous company, I loved it. It was a great job, great people, great products, was fantastic. But the folks from KHS, Tabor Stamper, and at the time, the global CEO, Carl Leung, had met with me and told me they were thinking about making some changes and they wanted to be able to, you know, my name kept coming up. They wanted to talk to me. So I went, and even though I was perfectly happy where I was, I talked to them because I was always so enamored with KHS as a company. They always seemed like they did the things for the right reasons, right? You talk about that purpose. But I just, you know, I kept saying no. They kept coming back almost every 6 months, a year. This went on for several years. And then finally, when I turned 50, I remember speaking with them at the NAMM show, and I came home and I told my wife, who, trust me, to put up with me, by the way, you know, is a godsend. I'm not sure why she does it. I married out of my league, you know, but every day I don't question it because I'm not sure I want to know the answer. But I remember telling her that, you know, hey, you're not going to believe who, you know, I just talked to again. And she looked at me and kind of amazed me. And she just said, well, let me ask you something. She said, are you happy? I said, yes. And she said, are you content where you're at? And I said, yes. She just said to me, take the other job. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I just told you I was happy and I was content and, you know, I loved my job. And she said, all the years I know you, you're not one to ever be just happy and just content. She told me very clearly that I needed to be challenged and fulfilled.
That's cool. That's
And
amazing.
I just remember shaking my head like, oh my God, she either had Chinese and read a fortune cookie that day, or she's as brilliant as I always thought she was.
Yeah.
And so that's what brought me to KHS, and it's been the best thing I've ever done. And to be able to lead a company that has a purpose, really believes in the core values, has a mission statement and a vision, is pretty special. You know, we once asked one of the guys, I said, you know, what makes our success? Why are we so successful in an industry that is relatively stagnant? And without hesitation, that gentleman says, because we know where we're going and we know why we're doing it. And to hear that and realize that, oh, you know, our folks do get it. That makes a difference, you know. So you have to look for ways that even if you are progressing and it could plateau, is what is that next challenge, right? What is it that's going to push you and propel you even further? You know, whether it's being better at what you already do or looking for new channels to operate in or a new way to do that. Certainly the COVID-19 situation has taught that to everybody, right? We can't do business like we've been doing business. So how do we do it differently? How do we do it better? Sometimes it's going to be better, sometimes it's not, but it's just going to be different. And our team has been pretty incredible at coming up with content and sharing, and we've even developed some new products for the educational market, because one of the things, a big part of our business is education. And so our band and orchestral instruments, Jupiter and EXO and Altus and Azumi, those products, you know, as you know, are generated year over year by new music makers that are entering band programs. Well, the end of the school year is typically where they recruit for new students that want to join the band, right? So, but there's no schools. So how do you do that? So we were able to come up and develop a kind of a tryout kit that students, you know, can try various instruments, whether it be a trumpet, trombone, saxophone, clarinet, flute. They're basically just head joints that are in a single box that you can work with a teacher, educator, or a dealer and see, you know, do I have any prowess to do this? Do I want to do it and have that instrument? So, you know, these are all products made in a non-traditional sense out of, you know, as they say, space-age polymers. But you can clean them, right? So you can sanitize them, because these are all things we didn't have to think about before, right? They can be reused and so forth, and they're cost-effective. So you don't have to buy a $300 trumpet or a $500 trumpet just to see if you know, if you have a propensity to be able to play that instrument. So that was something that took off and has seen incredible success. But now we're still in the situation, will schools open up in the fall?
Right.
Will there be band programs? Are you going to put a bunch of kids into a single room and have them blowing spit through instruments? We don't know.
Right.
You know, we have to figure out, how do we deal with that?
Well,
music.
I can tell you personally that the reason I got into music was in elementary school, they had brought those movable tone bars. You could take them out, like sort of an xylophone layout, but they were the regular tone bars. And they would hand one to each of us, and we'd play a chord, and then she'd put them back into the piano configuration that was in the xylophone, right? And I started to realize every other one, if you played them together, they sounded good. That was the beginning of me becoming, you know, eventually having my life. We won't have that if we don't have instruments in the schools. It's crucial to have instruments in schools. And instruments, as we've, you know, we can't get into this today, but, you know, it's like I see numbers through instruments, through intervals. I understand my math has gone into music and my music has gone into math. You know, so there's so much of that the way I see things are shape-based. I still to this day count in my head when I see numbers as they're printed on dominoes. So if there's a 4, I count the dominant. But it's like that's that part of our brain, which is the music part of our brain. It defines the way I see science and see the world. And my whole reality was based around having just a little crumb of music was laid in front of me, but I picked it up. And
Sure.
I think that we need to make sure that we find a way that we give people the opportunity to be exposed to music. And you guys are big in that. You have the combo side, which is all the brands people see on rock stages and everything that is kind of like the cooler, the cool kids area of the company. But the orchestral side, where it's like Jupiter Instruments and EXO with the high-end stuff, that stuff is like, that's when kids get their first encounter. My son plays guitar nonstop now during COVID. Nonstop guitar. Out of tune guitar, by the way, which for me, it drives me bananas. But
So
he started.
yeah,
He's a preeminent jazz guitarist in the house. He started with tuba, a Jupiter tuba that came home. So, that was the beginning, and me trying to teach him jet. Remember? Bam, bam, ba-da, jet. That was the first couple days of him with his, but that was the gateway instrument for him. He may go on to do something in music. We need to give people the opportunity to have that. And even if they don't do it, I guarantee you that the arts, the STEM fields are going to be affected by their encounter with music, because it helps people visualize in their brain and connect that kind of information. It's crucial. And you guys are a big part of that. Before we go, we're running a little long here, but before we go, I want you to tell us, what can we expect? I know nobody knows. What can we expect the net result? I know we've stopped everything, right? So
right.
What does that look like? It's like a ship in the ocean that takes 10 miles to make a turn, right? Things happening now, miles down the road. I have the suspicion that as quickly as it stopped is not as quickly as it winds back into fruition. What does it look like to go to a Guitar Center and get product? Is the price is going to be ridiculous? How do we access things that come from the Far East, right? Like, what is the life of the consumer, in your opinion, how is it going to be different?
Well, that is the great unknown, right? And none of us have a crystal ball, but I think you're 100% correct. Our global economy came to a grinding halt, but it's going to take much longer to realize the effects of that. And remember, one of the critical pieces of this isn't just the virus itself, it's fear. Right? And how do we deal with that and take all the precautions? And I'm not saying fear is not, people's reality, because, it is, and there's a lot to be fearful of. But it's going to take a while. We see it from sports, we're seeing it in music, touring musicians and tours. When's that going to come back? When are you going to be able to play in theaters and stadiums and arenas, and we don't know what that's going to be. So do I see it happening this year? Probably not. We're just going to try to find our way into a semi day-to-day business, So from our aspect, from a music standpoint, we're trying to figure out, as we mentioned earlier, is how do we facilitate ongoing music education, or just people's ability to play. Now, because that's the other side of it too, right? You can only play so many video games, and you can only binge watch so much Netflix, and we believe that if we can get some of our artists and educators and players in front of people, that maybe they'll take away some inspiration and want to try something different, like music. And maybe that's how they start, rather than in the schools.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they'll want to be involved. We don't know. That's our hope. When schools go back, we're still trying to work with various states and state educational boards to figure out, what does that look like? You can't have a marching program if you can only have a class of 10 kids.
Right.
You may have 300 people in the marching band.
Right.
Will they have a marching band?
What does it look like? if America pushes back on manufacturing in China, what does it look like to the retailer whenever these factories, let's say, China, and I'm not opposed to having my saxophones made in China, maybe my medicine, right? But let's say they just said, we're not doing it. What's that look like for the consumer? It looks like much higher prices at the store, right?
It would certainly be much higher prices. When China manufacturing opened up many years ago, we did ourselves a disservice as an industry. Rather than being able to make more cost-effective instruments, and taking some of the profits from those more cost-effective instruments where the dealer could make more, it was still of value to the consumer, and then taking those additional profits and putting it back into the music world, right, and creating new music makers. We didn't. It was a race to zero. Who could make the cheapest product? And as consumers, that's what really kind of happened. Consumers demanded less and less expensive product. Now, Chinese manufacturing's come a long way, and they make some great products. So it doesn't have the same stigma that it used to, that it's made in China. They have some very advanced manufacturing capabilities. That's not everything, but there's a lot of it that happens. So, you kind of go through these waves where everybody wants made in the USA, but nobody necessarily wants to pay that price.
Well, I don't think we can ever go back. I think people are used to it.
Would be incredibly difficult.
It'd be very difficult.
I think that race to zero comment is pretty. It's a great. It really frames it. It's like, what do we value? We value cheap. I was talking with someone, it might have been you, Mike, but it's like I talk about all this stuff I'm buying on Amazon. And I'm like, how much of that stuff do I have a year later? You think about the stuff you're buying with this race to zero, whether it be chargers for your phone, or cases or whatever it is, extension cords. How much of that stuff do you have a year later? And it goes to show you it's disposable. It's what ends up in all the oceans around turtles' noses, right?
Right.
It's just an incredible thing. It's like, okay, the populace has spoken. They want cheap, but they also want the best, so it's like this war, which is a good war, cheap and great. We love that. Good, cheap, and fast, the pick any two. But, I'm wondering, it's like, okay, what does it look like for the consumer going forward? Is this going to be a difficult time? Are vendors that are already on the edge, like a Guitar Center? I mean, I know they're maybe too big to fail, but are these companies that are mom and pops, like the Alto Musics in New York and, pianos and stuff in Pittsburgh, is this going to be something that drives a business that was on the borderline out of business? Or is it something that we'll get through?
I think we'll get through it. I think good companies will find a way to succeed. Certainly shops like Pianos and Stuff, which I have a long history. I started my career at Pianos and Stuff, but they've always been able to find what their niche was and not rely just on cheap products. And, they have sales and service. And those companies that can do that, Alto Music's a good example of that as well. I don't think we'll be able to change the consumer's mindset. They'll always want value. But what we have to change is, what is that value? Is it just price, or is it service, or is it playability, or is it functionality? And as a manufacturer, it's up to us to be able to tell that story as to whatever the value is, the value proposition for the consumers are. I do think, of course, the tariffs have made most goods coming from China more expensive. Will it drive manufacturing back to the U.S.? Maybe. It could, but then there's got to be a lot of investment, to be able to, because the labor cost is so much more expensive in the U.S. Because we have, an overall means that people need to live by.
Well, that's an interesting point too. It's like you read stories about them having nets around the iPhone plant in China because people were throwing themselves out of the buildings. It's like people here care, but they don't care enough not to buy Nike tennis shoes that are made by 10-year-old kids in the Philippines. You know, it's like there's a certain hypocrisy that obviously we're not going to go into, but there's this odd dichotomy that we won't let it happen here, but we'll profit and send billions of dollars to do it somewhere else where we just don't ask how it's done. You know, I don't know what the solution is. I'd love to see more jobs in America, but Americans, you know, we can't be competitive. Whenever we talk to Nick Perdomo and talk about what a worker costs in Nicaragua versus one in Miami, you get to very quickly learn that the Excel tables won't match up. You know, so we're not going to be bringing manufacturing to the United States, are we?
You may see some of it. You know, it would take a lot of technical proficiency to get the efficiencies needed to outweigh the labor cost.
You'd almost need to make it a plant full of robots, right?
Yeah. Then did you really bring any jobs back to the U.S.?
Yeah, you got 2 guys working on 1 billion robots.
Right? I remember one of my very first trips to China, and I was so excited to see the manufacturing, and it was really a pretty incredible facility. But I kept asking, well, why aren't we automating this, or why aren't we doing that, and so forth and so on? And the answer was because it's far less money just to put more people on it.
Right.
You know, than the overall long-term investment in what that would cost.
Right.
You know, and, you know, China kind of has an unfair advantage in many cases. A lot of the manufacturing is government subsidized. You know, it would be hard as a capitalist country,
right,
to say the government would, or should, for that matter, you know, invest in private companies the way that they have done in the past in China. But that's what's built their economy. So it was a very calculated move to be able to bring manufacturing, and then the world becomes reliant on that manufacturing.
Right.
And then they can continue to raise prices, and they can continue to have a control over the world.
That's the scary part.
It is, but it's how you can deal with that. You can, you know, there's a lot of companies that are looking for alternate, you know, channels, alternate countries to be able to manufacture in. But, you know, once again, it goes back to the unfortunate part is they're just looking for cheaper and cheaper areas, the next China. Right?
You know what will solve it all? In all seriousness, we need an alien invasion. We need something that causes the world to see our similarities and say, oh, wait a minute. Yes, you're Chinese, but you're human. And we need to fight this other, you know, this other greater enemy. You know, it's like in lieu of an enemy, we create enemies. We divide ourselves. We find a reason to go over to the next village and punch the guy in the nose, right? Yeah. But, you know, what we really need is an asteroid coming at the United States, you know, at the globe, you know, the size of the moon. Or we need...
It's a crisis, right? That's what's going to pull us all together, you know?
God knows it's not this COVID thing, you know? I mean, everyone's blaming each other for it.
Well, it gets to that. You know, it brings everybody together. Now everybody's blaming each other. And
right, the longer it goes on, it gets uglier.
Right. None of it matters. What matters is how do we get back to where we need to be? First and foremost, we make sure people are healthy and safe. Let's find a solution, a vaccine, or how to treat.
Yeah.
And then who cares where the blame comes from?
Yeah.
You know, let's take care of what the problem is and try to alleviate it from happening again.
Well, that's why you're a leader. That's why you run KHS. Thank you for coming. You are a gift as a friend. You're a good human. Yeah. You made my life better. I appreciate you. You inspire me, all that stuff. And I think KHS is lucky to have you. And I'm proud to be associated with those brands because of you and because they're great brands. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Jerry.
This is maybe our longest podcast. So
sorry.
Congratulations. You've done it. You've broken our...
Woohoo! All right.
All right, so we love you, buddy, and we appreciate you. Keep on doing what you're doing and inspiring all those folks and all of us. We appreciate you. And from the West Barn, we're signing off.